And you're up against some big, scary things in here. And they're really, really fascinating. And I really ended up liking Grace a lot more than I would. I thought this was going to be sort of like Resident Evil Requiem 2, I believe was not Requiem 2. Resident Evil, what was the other one? You know what I'm talking about? The two third person
Revelations?
ones. Revelations 2. Yeah, notoriously kind of split the protagonist between one who's got a gun and one who's got just like a flashlight. And so I thought Grace would be totally helpless here, and she's not. Like she's really cool, she's really smart, she's clever, she gets some really fun toys and tools to play with. And the titular Requiem, which is a big gun that kind of gets passed back and forth between the protagonists, it's got some kickback, and you want to save those bullets for special moments and stuff like that. And so her puzzles are really clever, and her sections are really smart and tense. And then you kick over to Leon, and you're revisiting this character that you haven't really connected with in a new way in a long time. And I think it's kind of hard to lose track of that because we've got Resident Evil Remake 2 came out in 2018. We've got Resident Evil Remake 4 came out in 2023. Both of those games are Leon-centric games, so he's kind of like fresh in your head, right? Those games take place a long time ago, right? Decades ago. Resident Evil 4 came out in 2005. 6 came out a few years later. Those were like the only experiences we had with Leon for a long, long time. And then the franchise kind of dipped out for a little bit. And we got 7 and 8, where it's, Chris showed up in 7, but Leon wasn't really like front and center in those games. And so this is our first time seeing him again, and he's dealing with being kind of older and kind of withered and wrinkly, and he's got some weight and some trauma he's been dealing with from like back in the day, and
put on about 40, 50 pounds.
Yeah, that happens, right? And then Grace is there too, and Grace is also dealing with some shit. And so you have these two characters that are kind of working together, helping each other out. Their paths are branching back and forth, and the game does a really good job of balancing these two play styles into one sort of complete narrative. And I think it's something that previous Resident Evil games have struggled with, and this is the closest it's ever come to just like really nailing that recipe of like, okay, we understand that Resident Evil 4 broke the formula in good ways and also not so great ways for some classic fans, right? And we know that people want action stuff and they want survival stuff, and this game nails it. And I think for me, it might be my favorite Resident Evil since Resident Evil 4, specifically because yeah, when I finished it, I immediately wanted to play it again. And then I played it again, and I immediately wanted to play it again. And to me, that's the sign of like a really good Resident Evil game, right? It's got like some big, fun, cool stuff. It's got some silly, campy stuff. It's got some goofy one-liners from Leon. It's got some like really great, cool environments. Ultimately, like I like castles and, the weird cornfields full of werewolves in Resident Evil 8. That's got vampires and all this other stuff. I love those things more than I love sort of a bombed out post-apocalypse or a hospital, right? Just on a very fundamental movie monster level. But as a whole game, I think I like this one more. And so, yeah, in a lot of ways, and I'm writing a whole piece about this right now, video games don't really check back in on their protagonists after a long time, right? Like, it's actually pretty rare. We get that a lot in Hollywood because Hollywood is based on real human beings that get old. And video game characters are sort of like this Bart Simpson thing where they're just kind of like doomed to loop in 4th grade forever. And nobody wants old Mario or old Sonic, or he's like, I mean, I kind of want an old Crash Bandicoot, right, played by John Cena or whatever.
Yeah, I mean,
every week.
I feel like you get periodic reboots. Like we've had Lara Croft has been rebooted how many times? The Uncharted did the whole thing of like, oh, Nate's old now, let's do that. We've gotten older Kratos, but then there's like there's Metal Gear, there's Yakuza. It happens, but I feel like it's more of like a kind of gradual progression than it is. Like the thing I didn't expect about this when you're telling me about it first, it's kind of really just framing it, is you use the term legacy sequel, which is like what we refer to like a Force Awakens, a
Blade Runner 2049,
a Jurassic World type, where it's like
other various Harrison Ford vehicles.
Yeah, it's taking a franchise, it's taking a familiar thing, and it's doing new stuff with it. It's adding new characters, but it's also it's a torch passing ceremony, and it brings in brings in somebody new, and then it brings back somebody old, and it's supposed to simultaneously appeal to people who are nostalgic for the old stuff while also onboarding a bunch of new people. And these things go either way. Sometimes they're fun, sometimes they're completely soulless and hollow. And what's bizarre about that is at no point, looking at the early lead up to this game, did that seem like it was the case?
No, not at all.
And what was
not at all?
Yeah, completely. The fact that they call it Requiem. Requiem obviously is kind of that word gets used left and right, but it does sort of have a somber retrospective tone to it almost. Mm-hmm. And leading up to it, we called it RE9. We heard Resident Evil 9. It's going to be it continues the funny ass naming convention of Resident Evil, and the Vil spells a Roman numeral 7, or then Village, where the Vil spells a Roman numeral 8, and they turn the Q in Requiem into a 9, which was a bit of a stretch, but whatever, I'll allow it. But that, even just there, the fact that it is at that spot and that it is presented with first-person gameplay, and it's looking very grounded. It's the earliest stuff we saw was Grace in a FBI office. It has kind of very almost somber, like muted tones to it. And my first thought was this is continuing from 8. This would be picking up where I didn't think it was gonna have Ethan Winters, but I thought it was gonna be kind of continuing the kind of almost isolated feeling that those games had from the rest of the series. Like it feels like obviously Umbrella comes into play there, but it seems like it's kind of doing its own thing, or almost like another reboot based on what 7 was. Like it seems like it was kind of exploring a new territory. And then we heard all this stuff about Leon, and gradually it kind of trickled out. They're like, yeah, this has got some Leon. And now you're coming out, you're like, no, this is a Leon Kennedy game. This is this is RE4 too, which again makes perfect sense because the last game that came out was RE4 Remake, and obviously a lot of people played that, so it makes a ton of sense to sort of thread that needle of they basically have been bouncing between modern first-person Resident Evil games that are more grounded, more realistic, and then remakes of the Leon ones, with the exception of 3, and taking these weaving these things back and forth, and it seems like this is where these two paths kind of cross, and it's an overlap of the two.
That's exactly it. Yeah, I think you nailed it. I think it's as much of a love letter to 4 as it is to 2, and mechanically a lot of the stuff from 1. And I was in the same boat, man. Like I thought Grace was going to be another Ethan Winters, and I think what's fascinating about this game, and this isn't giving anything away, early on, she is trembling, and she is stumbling, and she's running in fear, and she becomes more capable and more confident as the sort of narrative unfolds. And I think that's really cool, because that's not like you are watching the groundwork for potentially the next generation of Resident Evil protagonists, right? Like you're going, it's not going to be Chris and Leon and them forever, right? Like at some point there's going to be that kind of torch passing. And so like I don't think Grace is going to be suplexing people, off in a building and doing jump kicks and jumping out of windows and stuff like that. But like I think like in her next game, you're gonna have a character that's stronger than they were at the start of this game, right? And not as scared and not as trembling and not as petrified about everything. Obviously, you see things in these games that normal people don't see, and so being completely unshaken is basically impossible. But yeah, Capcom did a really good job of hiding the fact that this is a legacy sequel to Resident Evil 4 and Resident Evil 2. Like we saw in the marketing that they were going back to Raccoon City. We saw on a recent State of Play that they were going to show a very specific environment, which I wish they didn't show, because had I stumbled upon that naturally, I would have been ecstatic. So if you didn't see that for whatever reason, and you're here, don't go watch that. But either way, that section was awesome. It's full of great Easter eggs and surprises. And this is a fantastic game. This is one of my favorite games of this generation. This is one of my favorite horror games ever. This is one of my favorite Resident Evil games ever. I really like this game, man.
Hey, thanks for watching this clip from Beyond, IGN's weekly PlayStation show. You can find the full episode over on youtube.com/IGN Games. And don't forget, new episodes of Beyond drop every Wednesday on IGN.com, the IGN Games YouTube, and all your favorite podcast platforms. Thanks again for watching, and as always, Beyond.